It was just another grey morning in the city, the kind where the sun didn't even bother showing up. Sophia had already tied her hair into a tight bun, threw on her worn-out beige uniform, and stepped out of her one-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and last night's noodles. Her job wasn't glamorous, but it paid just enough to cover rent, utilities, and occasionally some second-hand shoes for her 6-year-old daughter, Layla. The mansion she worked in sat like a quiet beast in the rich part of town. Big iron gates, tall hedges, cameras in every corner. A world that didn't belong to people like her. But she wasn't new to this life. She'd been a housemaid for the Remington family for over a year now, silent, careful, and always keeping her head down. Until today, Mr. Daniel Remington, early 40s fit, always in crisp shirts that smelled of cedar and money, wasn't usually home this early. He was the kind of man who didn't say much, but when he did, his voice carried the kind of authority that made your spine straighten. Sophia had learned to avoid his eyes. She didn't like the way he looked at her sometimes, like she wasn't just dusting the shelves but something else altogether. She entered through the service door, same as every day, and got to work. Kitchen first, then the library. She was humming quietly, her gloves squeaking against the polished wood of the bookshelves, when she turned around, and there he was. "Morning," he said casually, leaning against the doorway with his hands in his pockets. "Good morning, sir," she replied quickly, eyes darting back to the shelf, trying to act like she didn't notice the way he was watching her. "You always start with the library?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. Call me Daniel." She stiffened. He never asked her that before. "I prefer to keep things professional, sir." He smiled, walked a little closer. "Professional is overrated sometimes." She didn't know what to say to that. Her hands started shaking a bit, but she kept cleaning. It was probably nothing. Maybe he was just being friendly, in that rich people who think everything is flirting way. Then came the moment that changed everything. She turned to grab the stepladder. That's when he moved fast, too fast. He reached out, cupped her face, and pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't slow. It was entitled Selfish and Sudden. Sophia froze, her heart jumping into her throat. Her eyes went wide, and for half a second all she saw was her daughter's face in her mind. Layla, innocent, sleeping in their little apartment, depending on her. Then her instincts took over. She pulled back, hand raised, and slapped him across the face, with everything she had. It echoed through the library like thunder against the books. He staggered a little, touching his cheek, completely stunned. Sophia's chest was heaving, tears already rising in her eyes, not from fear, but rage. "Don't you ever touch me." "Like that again," she hissed, her voice trembling but loud. Silence. Then a smirk curled on his lips. Not anger, not shame, just cold amusement. "You have no idea what you just did." She stepped back, grabbing her cleaning supplies like a shield. "I know exactly what I did. I protected myself." He didn't say anything more. He just turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. And Sophia stood there, heart pounding, hands shaking. She didn't know what came next. Would she be fired, arrested, disappeared? But something deep in her gut told her this wasn't over, not even close. Sophia didn't even bother finishing the rest of the room. Her hands were still trembling as she wiped them on her apron and left the duster behind like it was some kind of evidence. She kept replaying the moment in her head, his hand on her face, that smug look afterward, and her own hand slapping across his cheek. The sound of it still rang in her ears like a warning bell. She walked fast, passing through the kitchen where Martha, the cook, glanced up but didn't say anything. Didn't say. No one ever did, even if they saw something, even if they knew. She made it outside into the back garden and leaned against the wall, pulling her phone out of her pocket. A single missed call from Layla's school. She stared at it, thumb hovering, but couldn't bring herself to call back yet. Not like this. Her head was spinning and she could barely breathe. Her job was on the line, and worse, her safety. Men like Daniel Remington didn't lose. They didn't like being told no, and they sure as hell didn't like getting slapped by the help. She waited 10, maybe 15 minutes outside, trying to calm herself down. She thought maybe she could finish the day, pretend it didn't happen, and walk out quietly. But when she came back inside, the atmosphere had already changed. Everyone in the house was quiet. Too quiet. Martha wasn't in the kitchen anymore. The butler, Mr. Jameson, gave her a long, unreadable look as he passed by. Sophia swallowed. Hard. Word had gotten out. By the time she reached the hallway leading to the guest bedrooms, Daniel was already standing there, waiting like some villain in a soap opera. "Pack your things," he said flatly. "You're done here." Sophia stared at him. "You're firing me." "No," he said, and his voice was low, dangerous. "You're being dismissed." The difference wasn't lost on her. Being fired might get you severance. Dismissed meant she was being thrown out like a piece of trash. No questions, no reference, no chance to explain. Sophia's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of begging. She walked past him slowly, brushing his shoulder without looking at him, and went to the staff quarters upstairs. Her small room smelled like lavender and dust. It took her all of 3 minutes to pack everything she owned: 2 uniforms, her phone charger, a photo of Layla, and her savings, $312 in a jar hidden behind the radiator. That was it. A year of work, and that was all she had to show for it. She carried her bag downstairs, thinking he'd be gone. But Daniel was still there, leaning against the banister, like he was waiting to make sure she really left. As she reached the door, he finally spoke again. "You made a mistake, Sophia." She turned, meeting his gaze with steel in her eyes. "So did you." And she walked out. The street outside the mansion felt colder than usual. The sky had turned a darker gray, like the universe was in on it. She checked her phone and dialed the school. A tired-sounding receptionist told her Layla had a fever and had been sent home early with a neighbor. Sophia rushed to the bus stop, feeling a panic she hadn't let herself feel until now. She couldn't afford to be jobless, not even for a week. Layla needed food, medicine, school books. Rent was due in 5 days, and Daniel Remington just threw her to the wolves. By the time she made it back to her tiny apartment, Layla was lying on the couch, cheeks flushed and blankets up to her chin. Mrs. Alvarez, the old woman from next door, gave Sophia a knowing look, but didn't ask questions, just patted her shoulder, and left with a quiet, "She's a strong girl like her mama." Sophia sat on the edge of the couch, brushing Layla's damp curls off her forehead, and for the first time all day, she let herself cry. Silent tears, bitter and heavy. She wasn't just humiliated, she was in danger, because rich men like Daniel didn't forget when poor women embarrassed them. They didn't forgive, they retaliated. And deep down, Sophia could feel it coming. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning was no better. Layla's fever had come down slightly, but Sophia had bigger problems knocking at her door, literally. She was in the kitchen stirring rice porridge when a loud knock made her flinch. Not just one, 3 hard, deliberate bangs. She wiped her hands quickly, heart already thudding. Maybe it was the landlord asking about rent, or Mrs. Alvarez again. But when she opened the door, her heart sank. 2 police officers stood outside. "Miss Sophia Cortez?" the taller one asked. "Yes. You've been named in a workplace incident. We need you to come down to the station and answer a few questions." Sophia blinked. "What incident?" The officers didn't smile. They didn't even look at her like a person, just like a case number. "Assault. Your employer filed a complaint." Her stomach twisted into knots. "Daniel." "Of course." "I was the one assaulted," she said quickly. "He kissed me without consent. I defended myself." "You can explain that at the station," the other officer said, already taking a step forward like he might cuff her. "I have a child. She's sick. Can I at least—" "Ma'am," the taller officer interrupted, "we're not arresting you right now, we just need a statement." Sophia nodded slowly, then turned to her neighbor's apartment. Thankfully, Mrs. Alvarez opened the door, before she even knocked. "I'll watch her," the old woman said softly, glancing at the officers with narrowed eyes. Sophia left with them. The ride to the station was silent. The officer in the passenger seat kept glancing at her like she was something he scraped off his shoe. It didn't matter what she said. She was the maid, the poor brown woman, And Daniel Remington was the man with money, a reputation, and connections. That kiss, that slap. She was supposed to keep quiet about it, pretend it didn't happen. But she didn't. And now they were going to make her pay. At the station, she sat in a cold chair under flickering lights while they asked her to clarify her version. She told them everything. How he kissed her. How she reacted. How he smirked afterward like it was a game. They scribbled notes, nodded, but their faces didn't change. "He says you initiated contact," one of them said. Sophia laughed, bitter, hollow. "Do you think I wanted that? I work for him. I have a kid to feed. Can anyone corroborate your story?" No, we were alone." "Then it's your word against his," the officer said flatly. 3 hours later, they let her go. No charges, yet. But the warning was clear. By the time she got home, she felt like the world was pressing down on her chest. Mrs. Alvarez was sitting with Layla, who was sleeping again. She handed Sophia a cup of tea without a word, just a nod of understanding that spoke more than pity ever could. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. She lay awake, eyes on the cracked ceiling, feeling the weight of everything. The slap wasn't just a slap, it was a message. And now Daniel was sending one back. He wanted her scared, humiliated, cornered. But what he didn't know was that Sophia had spent her whole life surviving corners. She woke up early, left Layla with Mrs. Alvarez again, and took the bus across town. Not to a job, but to a legal aid office for women. She didn't have money for a lawyer, but she could at least try to protect herself. The woman at the desk listened, nodding carefully, asking gentle but direct questions. "He's not pressing criminal charges yet," the woman said. "But if he's trying to smear you or get you blacklisted from other jobs, we can file a harassment claim. Maybe even look into workplace misconduct." "I don't want his money," Sophia said. "I just want him to leave me alone." Unfortunately, men like him only stop when they're afraid of losing something: reputation, power, or money, preferably all three. Sophia left the office with a card in her pocket and a decision weighing in her bones. She could stay quiet, hide, live in fear, or she could fight, and maybe, just maybe, take Daniel Remington down with her. Sophia hadn't touched her savings jar in over 6 months. It wasn't much, just a few $100s, but it had been her safety net. Emergency rent, medicine for Layla. But now it was fuel. Fuel for a fight she never thought she'd start. The Legal Aid Center had given her a few names: journalists, advocates, women who'd taken on powerful men before and refused to be buried under silence. Sophia wasn't stupid. She knew going public would mean hell. She'd be branded a liar, a gold digger, worse. But silence was its own kind of prison. She called one of the numbers the next day. A woman named Zara picked up. Her voice was calm but sharp, like someone used to walking into flames without blinking. "I'm not a reporter," Zara said, "but I work with people who make noise. Tell me what happened, all of it." So Sophia told her. The kiss, the slap, the dismissal, the police visit. And finally, the look in Daniel's eyes that said he could ruin her whenever he felt like it. By the time she finished, Zara was silent for a moment. Then she said, "I believe you, but if we do this, there's no going back. I don't want to hide anymore." That night, an anonymous blog post went live on a women's rights site. It didn't mention names, just a wealthy employer in Westchester County and a single mother working as a housemaid. But the story hit raw nerves. Hundreds of comments poured in within hours, some supportive, some cruel, some suspicious, but people were reading, whispering. Daniel noticed. The next morning, Sophia received a letter at her apartment. No stamp. No return address, just her name written in cold black ink. Inside, a cease and desist. Daniel's lawyers wanted the post taken down. They called it defamatory, false, legally actionable. The usual threats meant to scare people quiet. Sophia stared at the letter, then she tore it in half and threw it in the trash. That same evening, her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. She answered anyway. "Sophia," came the voice, smooth, controlled. "Daniel." Her blood went cold. "You've made this bigger than it needed to be," he said. "You could have walked away quietly." "I tried," she snapped. "You sent cops to my door." "You humiliated me," he said, voice tightening. "You hit me. You touched me without permission," she hissed. "You started this." There was a long silence. Then, chillingly, "Calm. This is going to end badly for you. And for your daughter." The line went dead. Sophia stood frozen in her kitchen, phone shaking in her hand. That was it. The final line crossed. He was threatening Layla now. She called Zara back, told her everything. Zara's voice didn't waver. "Then we go public. Names, faces, everything." The next day, Sophia's story ran on a major online news outlet, this time with her full name, her photo, and his. Daniel Remington, CEO of Remtech Holdings, accused by his former housemaid of assault and intimidation. It spread like wildfire. Suddenly, Sophia wasn't just a housemaid with no voice. She was a headline, a symbol, a mother fighting back. News vans started parking near her building. Strangers offered groceries. Some sent hateful messages, too. Called her a liar, a snake. But others, so many others, reached out with their own stories. And then came the most unexpected call. "Hi," the voice on the line said, nervous, shaky. "My name's Ellie. I used to work for Mr. Remington, too, and I believe you, because he did the same thing to me." Sophia felt her knees go weak. Another woman. No, not just one. By the end of the week, there were 4, all house staff, all with eerily similar stories, the late-night conversations, the touches, the threats. Zara organized everything, got a lawyer willing to work pro bono, a press conference was scheduled. Daniel Remington still hadn't made a statement, but Sophia could feel it. His empire was starting to crack. He wanted her to disappear. Instead, she had become the match that lit the fire. The day of the press conference felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Sophia had barely slept the night before. She'd stayed up watching Layla breathe softly, peacefully, completely unaware of the storm her mother was about to walk into. The room where the conference was held wasn't huge, but it was packed. Journalists, activists, cameras with blinking red lights that made Sophia's skin crawl. She wasn't used to being looked at like this, not as a housemaid, not as a woman, not as someone who had anything important to say. But now they were all waiting on her. Zara stood beside her, giving a small nod. Behind them sat the other women, Ellie, Marcia, Tanya, and Fatima, 4 former employees of Daniel Remington, 4 more voices who had lived in the shadows until Sophia pulled them into the light. The lawyer spoke first, laying out the facts, the legal filings, the complaints being processed. Then it was Sophia's turn. She stepped up to the mic with trembling fingers and a pounding heart. "My name is Sophia Cortez. I'm a mother, a worker, and a woman who thought she could never fight back." She told her story. All of it. She spoke about being kissed without consent, about slapping the man who thought he owned her body, about losing her job, about being threatened, silenced, and nearly broken. But not broken. Never broken. "I'm not here to destroy someone. I'm here because I refuse to be destroyed." The room was silent when she finished. Some clapped, some cried, some just stared, stunned that someone like her, the invisible help, had finally stood up and shouted back. The media storm that followed was a hurricane. Headlines screamed, "CEO accused of misconduct by former maid." Talk shows debated whether Sophia was brave or opportunistic. Social media exploded. Half the country was rallying behind her while the other half dug through her life looking for something to discredit her. Photos of Layla were pulled off her Facebook. A local gossip site posted Sophia's eviction history as if poverty somehow made her story less true. And then Daniel finally spoke. A sleek, scripted video appeared online. Him in his office, his voice perfectly measured. "These accusations are false. I have never and would never assault anyone. This is an attack on my character by disgruntled former employees orchestrated by political activists with an agenda." He looked right into the camera. "I will be pursuing legal action against those spreading these lies." Sophia watched the video on her phone, alone in the kitchen, and felt her stomach twist. He was going to sue, and even though the truth was on her side, truth didn't pay court fees. Truth didn't beat expensive lawyers. He was rich. She was broke. That night, she got another call. Unknown number, she answered cautiously. Hello? I can help. You, the voice said. It was male, deep, calm, confident. Who is this? Let's just say I used to work with Remington. Not for him. I know things that could make your case a lot stronger. Sophia's heart skipped. Why would you help me? Because I've seen the way he operates, and you're not the first person he's hurt, you're just the first to fight back. The man didn't give his name, just promised to send something to her lawyer the next day. Check your inbox by noon. And he hung up. Sophia stared at the phone, her thoughts racing. Was it a trap? Was it real? She didn't know, but she felt something shift. Maybe Daniel wasn't as untouchable as he thought. Maybe his own people were starting to turn on him. Maybe the wall he'd built around his reputation was already cracking, and it wouldn't take much more to bring the whole thing crashing down. The next morning, Sophia was sitting at her tiny kitchen table, coffee cold in her hands, staring at the clock. 11:59 a.m. 1 minute left. Her phone buzzed. One new email. Subject: Remtech Internal, Urgent. She opened it, hands trembling. The message was brief, no sender name, just an attachment labeled HR Misconduct, Records, Confidential, PDF. She forwarded it straight to her lawyer, who called within minutes. Sophia, he said, voice tight with urgency, this is dynamite. What is it? It's a compiled list of internal complaints filed against Daniel. 3 women, all house staff, all under non-disclosure agreements, all settled quietly, through a private legal counsel, and they match everything the other women have said. Sophia swallowed. Why haven't they come forward? Because Daniel paid them off to keep quiet, big money, 5 figures each. And now? Well, now those NDAs might not protect him anymore, because you've got a pattern, and if this file is real, he covered up sexual misconduct. That's not just workplace abuse, that's criminal. Everything was moving fast now. The press got wind of the file leak. The article titles changed from Accusation Against CEO to Remtech Scandal Widens, Secret Settlements Exposed. News anchors were no longer defending him. Investors started pulling out. Stock prices began to fall. And Daniel? He snapped. First, he released another video. No suit, no polish this time. Just rage barely held behind his eyes. He called it a witch hunt, claimed his business rivals were funding Sophia to ruin him, called her a liar again, said she was exploiting the system, a single mother playing victim to make money. But the world was tired of men like him pretending they were the victims. The pressure kept building. Lawyers turned. Board members began making statements. We take these allegations seriously. The usual PR spin, but underneath it, panic. One day later, a former executive assistant came forward. She wasn't bound by an NDA. Her statement was brutal, raw, and detailed. He used his power to corner women, threaten them, touch them. Reported it. They told me to quit if I had a problem. The dominoes were falling, and through all of it, Sophia stayed quiet. Not because she was scared, but because she knew now she didn't have to scream anymore. The world was finally listening. Then a letter came in the mail, this time not a threat, a settlement offer. $250,000. No admission of guilt, no public apology. Just silence in return. Her lawyer called her again. This is his way out. He thinks you'll fold. I won't, Sophia said quietly. You're sure? I don't want his money, she said. I want him exposed. I want him to wake up every day knowing the world knows what he is. And maybe even more than that, she wanted Layla to grow up in a world where her mother didn't back down. So they refused. That same week, the district attorney's office confirmed they were opening an official investigation into Daniel Remington and Remtech Holdings, civil suits, criminal inquiries, and possible charges of sexual misconduct, witness intimidation, and obstruction. It was all catching up to him now. Sophia didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. Because it wasn't over. The hardest part was still ahead, facing him again, in court. The courthouse was colder than Sophia expected, not in temperature, but in energy. Polished floors, hollow echoes, stiff men in suits pretending they weren't judging her the moment she stepped inside. Even with Zara and her lawyer by her side, Sophia felt the weight of eyes, not just Daniel's legal team, but reporters, bystanders, even jurors who hadn't said a word yet, but already carried their biases like heavy coats. Daniel sat across, the room just feet away from her, and yet still drenched in the arrogance of distance. Expensive suit, hair slicked, hands folded neatly on the table like he didn't have skeletons gnawing at the closet door behind him. He looked bored, like the trial was an inconvenience, not a reckoning. Sophia didn't look away, not once. When the judge called the courtroom to order, it began. Opening statements. Daniel's lawyers tried to paint her as vindictive, attention-seeking, a disgruntled employee fired for poor conduct. They flashed pay stubs on a screen, showed pictures of her modest apartment, tried to frame her struggle as proof she had motive to fabricate. But her lawyer didn't flinch. He opened by saying, "This case is not about money. It's about power, abuse of it, and a woman who refused to stay silent when the world told her to." Sophia took the stand on the third day. Her palms were sweaty, knees stiff. She looked out at the jury, 7 men, 5 women, and knew half of them probably already had their minds made up, that she was either brave or deceitful. There was rarely an in-between. She told her story again, but this time under oath. She described every detail. The way Daniel approached her in the library, the kiss, the slap, the smirk, the dismissal, the threats. Her voice cracked only once, when she mentioned Layla. "He threatened my daughter," she said. "That was the moment I stopped being scared. That was the moment I knew I had to burn his house down, not literally but publicly." Then came the cross-examination. Daniel's lawyer, a sleek man in a $1,000 suit with dead eyes, tried to twist her words, tried to poke holes, brought up her financial status again, asked why she didn't quit sooner if she felt uncomfortable. Sophia stared him dead in the face. Because poor women don't get the luxury of quitting. That shut him up for a second. Then came the women, Ellie, Tanya, Fatima. One by one they told their truth. Each of their stories echoed the same pattern, subtle touches, inappropriate comments, private moments that blurred into harassment, all covered up with NDAs, all paid to forget. But the final blow came from the man who had emailed her, the former security consultant for Remtech. He took the stand with documents in hand, emails, messages, an internal complaint written by a junior staffer that was buried within hours, audio clips, quietly recorded during risk management meetings. They had tried to silence him too with money. He took none of it. The company knew, he said plainly. They just didn't care, as long as it stayed quiet. By the end of the week, Daniel's mask had cracked. He was no longer the calm, confident CEO. He refused to testify. His eyes darted when Sophia looked at him. He knew. The room knew. The jury felt it. The verdict wasn't instant. They deliberated for hours. But when the foreman stood and read the decision, guilty on multiple counts, including workplace misconduct, sexual harassment, and retaliation, Sophia didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just let out the longest breath of her life. Daniel didn't look at her as they led him out, and that, in its own way, was a confession. The courthouse emptied slowly. People filed out, murmuring, glancing at Sophia like she was something both fragile and ferocious. Some smiled, some just nodded. A few reporters tried to chase her down the steps, throwing questions like confetti. "How do you feel? What happens next? Do you regret anything?" But she didn't stop. She just walked, Layla's photo still folded in her jacket pocket, heart pounding with something she hadn't felt in months. Freedom. Real freedom. Not the kind they let you borrow as long as you stay quiet and obedient. But the kind you rip out of a system's throat when it tries to silence you. She got home that night to a kitchen full of flowers. Not from admirers or strangers, from the other women, all of them. Each bouquet came with a small card. Just one. Word on each, "Thank you." The days that followed weren't peaceful. Nothing was magically fixed. She didn't wake up to millions in her account or offers to speak on TV with polished makeup and lights in her face. Life was still life. Bills, bus rides, doctor's appointments for Layla, and the constant whisper of fear that something could still come back to bite her. But the silence was gone. Daniel's name was everywhere. Disgraced CEO, investors pulled out. The Remtech board forced him out entirely. More lawsuits followed. A deeper investigation uncovered fraud and tax evasion. He wouldn't just lose his empire, he'd likely lose years of his life behind bars. Sophia watched it all unfold on a cracked TV screen, not with vengeance in her chest, but relief. Not just for herself, but for every woman who'd ever been told to be quiet, to take it, to just keep your job and survive. She went back to work eventually, not as a maid, but at a local women's center helping others find the courage she never thought she had. The pay wasn't great, but it meant something. She belonged there. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It had become something bigger, a warning, a torch, a roadmap. One afternoon she was walking Layla home from school. The girl skipped ahead, her backpack bouncing, laughter flying through the air like music. "Mom," she said suddenly, stopping to look up at her, "are you still sad about the bad man?" Sophia paused, then knelt in front of her daughter, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "No, baby, I'm not sad," she said softly. "Because we're not afraid of bad men anymore." Layla nodded, satisfied, then bolted toward the park swing set. Sophia stood there, watching her, the sun warming her skin, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled. Not out of pride, not out of revenge, but out of peace. She had stood up, she had survived, and she had won.